Hello, how are you? Welcome to your favorite story channel. Let's get started. Chapter 1. Broken Love. Thiago was an ordinary man, but with a huge heart. He believed that love was not just about pretty words or grand gestures on special occasions. For him, love was demonstrated every day, in simple things: making breakfast, listening to what the other person had to say, leaving a loving note in the middle of the rush. And that was exactly what made him believe that his marriage with Marcela was special. For 2 years, they built a life together, full of moments that, although imperfect, seemed to be supported by a solid foundation of respect and affection. On that particular day, fate seemed to conspire to do something unusual. A power outage at the company interrupted work, and everyone was dismissed early. For Thiago, this was almost like a gift. He could spend more time with Marcela, something rare due to his intense routine. Inspired by this coincidence, he decided to transform that late afternoon into an unforgettable surprise. On his way home, he saw a flower shop and stopped without thinking twice. He carefully chose a bouquet of red roses, the flowers Marcela loved the most. She'll love it, he thought, smiling as he smelled the roses' scent. As he left, he noticed a chocolate shop next door. He remembered the nights when Marcela would devour her favorite chocolates while they watched their favorite series together. He couldn't resist and bought a box of artisanal chocolates, wrapped in a golden bow. Thiago drove through the city with a light heart, as if that simple moment were the promise of a special night. His mind traveled to the happy times he had spent with Marcela, the laughter during trips, the hugs on difficult days, the deep conversations about dreams and plans. He knew their marriage had gone through some storms, but he always believed that together they could overcome everything. As he turned the corner of the street where they lived, something unexpected interrupted his thoughts. Paulo's car, his best friend, was parked in the garage. Thiago frowned, confused. Paulo? What is he doing here at this time? It wasn't common for Paulo to show up unannounced, especially at a time when he knew Thiago would be at work. Even so, he tried to dispel any suspicion. Maybe it was something simple. Maybe Paulo was there to talk to Marcela about something Thiago didn't even know about. He parked across the street, picked up the bouquet and the box of chocolates, and walked to the front door. He noticed it was unlocked. How strange. Marcela never leaves the door open. He thought about calling her, but something made him hesitate. The silence inside the house seemed different, heavy. Even so, he went in and called out to her. No answer. As he walked down the hallway, he began to hear muffled voices. They were laughter. A feeling of discomfort began to grow in Thiago's chest, and his heart raced. He immediately recognized the voices: Marcela and Paulo. Each step to the bedroom door seemed harder than the last. Finally, he stopped in front of the half-open door and looked through the crack. The scene he saw on the other side was like a punch in the stomach. Marcela and Paulo were together, holding hands, laughing and kissing. The bouquet he was holding slipped a little in his hand, but he tightened his grip on it again, as if it could help him hold on to the ground that seemed to be collapsing beneath his feet. The final blow came with the words that escaped their lips. "When are you going to leave, Thiago?" Paulo asked, clearly impatient. "Soon," Marcela replied, with a cold tone that Thiago had never heard before. "I just want to make sure I get half of everything he has. I worked hard for this. I'm not going to leave empty-handed." Thiago's world stopped. He felt his legs weaken and had to lean on the wall to keep from falling. This wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was a betrayal of respect, of trust, of the life he believed he had built. Each word Marcela said was like a knife cutting a piece of his soul. Without the strength to face them, he left silently, without being noticed. He walked like a ghost to his car, the flowers and chocolates still in his hands. When he got in the vehicle, he closed the door and stood there, staring into space. The pain came like an avalanche. He felt tears streaming down his face as he gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to hold on to something amidst the chaos of his thoughts. At that moment, Thiago realized that his life had changed forever. The love he had dedicated so much time to building had been betrayed, not only by Marcela, but also by someone he considered a brother. The pain was overwhelming, but within it, a small spark of strength began to emerge. He knew that, despite everything, he had to keep going. He had to get back up and, somehow, rebuild. Chapter 2. Thiago's New Life. Thiago knew that, even with his heart broken, he could not let the pain control his life. He had always been a determined and practical man, and now he needed to use that strength to get back on his feet. The day after discovering the betrayal, he sought out a trusted friend, who was also a lawyer, named Felipe. Sitting in the office, Thiago told him everything, from the incident to Marcela's cold words about wanting to take half of everything he owned. Felipe listened attentively and, in the end, gave him some firm advice. "Thiago, if you want to protect what you have built, you need to act quickly and strategically." In the days that followed, Thiago organized his financial life like never before. He transferred all his assets to Anna, a childhood friend who had always been by his side. Anna was loyal and knew the gravity of the situation, so she agreed to help without hesitation. Thiago transferred everything to her: properties, investments, bank accounts. It wasn't an easy decision, but he knew it was the only way to stop Marcela from achieving what she planned. Meanwhile, Marcela began to realize that something was wrong. She tried to access the joint accounts and discovered that they were empty. She called Thiago several times, but he didn't answer. When she finally managed to speak to him, she was blunt. "What are you doing? You can't take away what is rightfully mine." Thiago replied calmly but firmly. "What you tried to do to me was worse. I won't let you keep taking advantage of me." Furious, Marcela decided to take the case to court. With the help of Paulo, who was advancing in his career and had resources, she hired a lawyer and filed a lawsuit. In court, Marcela tried to convince the judges that she was entitled to half of Thiago's assets, but he had already taken all the legal precautions. With proof of the betrayal and Felipe's support, Marcela was defeated. She left the court humiliated and with nothing. Without money or support, Marcela decided to leave and start a new life with Paulo. They tried to build something together, but the relationship soon began to fall apart, as there was no trust or mutual respect. Paulo, in turn, showed his true character. When difficulties arose, he abandoned Marcela without looking back. Meanwhile, Thiago found a new purpose. He decided to leave the city and start over in a peaceful place. With Anna's help, he bought a farm in an isolated region, surrounded by mountains and rivers. It was a piece of paradise, perfect for a fresh start. On the farm, Thiago found peace working with the land. He planted, harvested and cared for the animals, rediscovering the joy in simple things. The connection with nature brought serenity to his heart, which gradually left his sorrows behind. Anna, who had always been by his side, also spent more time on the farm. As the months went by, the two realized that their friendship had turned into something greater. The love between Thiago and Anna grew naturally, like the plants he tended in the fields. They were married in a simple ceremony, surrounded only by close friends. The farm became their home, a place where they built a new family based on trust, respect, and true love. Thiago learned that sometimes life's greatest pains are also the path to the greatest transformations. He not only survived what happened, but flourished. He found happiness in a life he could never have imagined and realized that, In the end, what really matters is not what is lost, but what is built afterwards. Chapter 3. Melissa's arrival. Marcela was never able to accept her defeat in court, and was tormented by the emptiness of having lost everything. Even with Paulo, who initially seemed promising, she felt a hole in her heart that not even luxury could fill. Surrounded by expensive clothes, shiny jewelry, and extravagant parties, Marcela desperately sought to regain the status she had lost, but nothing seemed to be enough. Her dissatisfaction grew with each passing day, fueled by envy and bitterness. It was in the midst of this scenario that Melissa entered Marcela and Paulo's lives. She was young, cheerful, and dedicated, the kind of person who could light up any room. Hired to take care of the house, Melissa did everything perfectly. She arrived early, cooked delicious dishes, and kept everything spotless. At first, Marcela seemed pleased with the new maid's efficiency. After all, someone had to make sure that her house continued to look like a palace. But, over time, something began to bother Marcela deeply. Melissa was beautiful, with bright eyes and a contagious energy that attracted attention, especially Paulo's. He often complimented Melissa's work, mentioning how the house had never been so well kept. For Marcela, each compliment was like a knife stab. Jealousy and insecurity began to grow inside her like a shadow. Marcela began to observe Melissa with suspicious eyes. She began to pick on small details, like the way the table was set or the perfume Melissa wore. Every time Paulo smiled or made a comment about her good work, Marcela felt her anger increase. Until one day, her mind hatched a cruel plan. "I'm going to put an end to this once and for all," she muttered to herself, with a mischievous smile on her face. She decided to set Melissa up, accusing her of stealing one of her most expensive earrings, a pair of emeralds that she rarely wore. Everything was meticulously planned. Marcela hid the earring in a corner of the house and waited for the right moment to confront Melissa. That afternoon, while Paulo was at home, Marcela put on a show. With an accusatory tone, she began to shout, "Melissa, where is my earring? I know you took it." Melissa, surprised and clearly confused, tried to defend herself. "Ms. Marcela, I would never steal anything from here. I didn't even know you had these earrings." Marcela didn't want to listen. She insisted that Melissa had hidden the earring somewhere, and, to humiliate her even more, demanded that she take off her shirt to prove that she wasn't hiding anything. Melissa hesitated, embarrassed and ashamed, but with tears in her eyes, she obeyed in an attempt to clear her name. It was then that something unexpected happened. When she took off her shirt, she revealed a birthmark on her back, in the shape of a half-moon. Paulo and Marcela froze. Marcela fell to the floor, sobbing like a child. Her face was covered in tears, and her words came out disjointed. "It can't be. It can't be." Paulo, not understanding anything, tried to calm her down. "What's going on, Marcela? Why are you like this?" But Melissa, who was also scared, didn't wait to hear an explanation. She grabbed her things and ran out of the house, disappearing into the street. While Paulo tried to put the pieces together, Marcela kept crying, clutching the ground as if her life depended on it. Something about that mark on Melissa's back had awakened deep memories, perhaps something she had never told anyone. That day was a turning point, but the consequences were yet to come. What did that mark mean? Why did Marcela react so intensely? And, most importantly, what would become of young Melissa, who was now alone, scared and without direction? The answer to these questions was only beginning to emerge. Chapter 4. The reunion between father and daughter. The farm was in its usual tranquility. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and gold, while Thiago, sitting on the porch, enjoyed the silence that always helped him put his thoughts in order. He watched the fields he cultivated with so much love, but was surprised by a figure in the distance, walking along the dirt road that led to his house. It was a young woman, dressed simply and with hesitant steps, but she carried in her eyes a determination that seemed greater than herself. Thiago frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone, and visitors were rare in that remote place. He stood up and walked to the gate, curious. When Melissa finally reached the front of the house, she looked exhausted, but determined. Before he could ask her anything, she looked up to look at him and, without saying a word, pulled the strap of her blouse down, revealing a half-moon-shaped birthmark on her back. Thiago felt his heart race. He froze, unable to look away from that sign. It was something he knew well, but didn't want to believe. Who are you?" he asked, his voice almost above a whisper. Melissa took a deep breath, fighting back the tears. "My name is Melissa, and Paulo sent me to you," he said. "He said you're my father." Those words echoed in Thiago's mind like an explosion. He took a step back, trying to process what he had just heard. Paulo, his former friend, who had betrayed his trust in every possible way, was now revealing that he had a daughter. Melissa began to tell her story, her voice trembling but full of emotion. She explained how she grew up without knowing who her father was, until Paulo, overcome by a rare moment of remorse, told her the truth. He told her that Thiago was a good man, someone who deserved to know she existed. As Melissa spoke, Thiago felt a whirlwind of emotions. He looked again at the birthmark. There was no doubt. The same mark had been present in his family for generations. The weight of the revelation hit him like a hurricane, but with it came certainty. You're my daughter," Thiago murmured, his voice breaking. Before Melissa could react, Thiago stepped forward and hugged her tightly. It was a hug full of lost years, full of regret, but also full of love. Tears began to stream down his face as he said, "Forgive me, my daughter. Forgive me for not knowing about you, for not being there when you needed me most." Melissa, surprised by the gesture, began to cry too. She had never felt anything like it before, a hug full of love and protection. "I just wanted to meet you," she said, with a shy smile. "I never knew what it was like to have a father. Until now." The moment was interrupted when Anna, Thiago's wife, appeared in the doorway, holding a basket of fruit. When she saw the scene, she stopped, confused. Thiago explained everything, while Melissa, embarrassed, watched. When he finished, Anna stepped forward and hugged Melissa. "Welcome to our family, dear. Here, you will have everything you have ever dreamed of." Thiago's children, curious, ran to Melissa, pulling her by the hand and asking who she was. Although shy at first, she was soon surrounded by games and laughter, feeling more welcomed than ever. In the following days, Melissa immersed herself in the routine of the farm. Thiago taught her how to care for the horses and plant seeds, patiently explaining every detail. He seemed determined to make up for lost time. Anna, with her loving way, taught Melissa how to make homemade bread and how to prepare preserves. Thiago's children took her to the creek, where they played skipping stones and picking ripe fruit. One night, while everyone was gathered around a campfire, Thiago took Melissa's hand and looked into her eyes. "I can't change the past, but I promise that from now on, I will do everything I can to be the father you deserve." Melissa smiled, with tears in her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. For the first time in her life, she felt complete. The farm, with its smell of fresh earth and starry sky, was not just a new place. It was the home where she had finally found what she had been looking for most, a family and the unconditional love of a father. And in that moment, under the soft light of the fire, Thiago, Anna, Melissa and the children laughed and shared stories. The void that had once existed in Melissa's heart was filled, and she knew that her life had changed forever. Now, she not only had a father, but also a home where she could be happy. Chapter 5. The Fall of Marcela and Paulo, in more detail. When Melissa returned to the city, she found Paulo working humbly at a market. He looked old, but his eyes conveyed a new serenity. When he saw her, he smiled sadly and said, "Melissa, I lost everything, but maybe that was fair. I did horrible things in the past. I'm trying to be a better person." Melissa silently forgave him, recognizing the transformation in Paulo. When she asked about Marcela, she learned that she was in a psychiatric hospital. When she visited Marcela, Melissa found a broken woman, holding a doll as if it were a baby. Marcela didn't recognize her, but Melissa, with tears in her eyes, chose to forgive her. "Despite everything, you are my mother," she said, touching her shoulder before leaving. Final chapter. A new home and a new beginning. The sun was setting when Melissa returned to the farm. The long shadows of the green fields stretched under the orange sky, and the fresh air was filled with the scent of earth and flowers. As soon as she walked through the door of the main house, she was greeted with warm smiles and tight hugs from Thiago, Anna, and her siblings. The farm seemed more alive than ever, and Melissa felt light in her heart, as if she had left a huge weight behind. That night, the family prepared a special dinner in her honor. The table was laden with dishes made with ingredients grown on the farm itself. Fresh vegetables, roast meat, and a simple but delicious cake that Anna had prepared. Throughout the meal, the sound of laughter and conversation filled the room, and Melissa felt, for the first time, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Thiago, in a moment of silence, stood up with an emotional smile. He looked around the table, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Melissa," he began, his voice firm but full of emotion, "life is not always fair. It takes away things we love, and sometimes gives us pain that seems impossible to bear. But it also gives us the chance to start over. You are my daughter, and I want you to know that this is your place. This is your family, and you will never be alone again." Melissa, already with tears in her eyes, looked at Thiago and then at Anna and her siblings. They smiled at her, sharing in this moment of deep connection. Feeling her heart overflow with gratitude, she replied in a choked voice, "I never thought I would have all this. You gave me something I didn't even know I needed. Love, security, and a family. Thank you for everything." After dinner, Thiago invited Melissa to go for a walk in the fields. They walked in silence for a few minutes, the sound of crickets and the wind rustling the leaves creating a peaceful soundtrack. He finally stopped near a large oak tree, one of the most beautiful spots on the farm, where the starry sky seemed closer. "You know," he said, looking at the horizon, "I spent many years trying to get over the past. But having you here now has shown me something. Sometimes the past needs to be faced, not ignored. I lost years without hearing from you, and that is something I will never be able to make up for. But I promise that from now on, I will do everything I can to make sure you know how much you are loved." Melissa hugged him, feeling the strength of Thiago's love. She knew he really wanted to make up for lost time. "I know, Daddy," she said, calling him that for the first time naturally. "And I want to build that future with you too. A life full of love and purpose." In the months that followed, Melissa found her place on the farm. She helped Anna with household chores, learned about farm management from Thiago, and developed deep bonds with her siblings. The simple but purposeful life brought her a happiness she had never known. Thiago also took steps to legally formalize Melissa's presence in the family. He registered her as his daughter, correcting years of neglect and ensuring that she had an official place in their new story. Their love grew with each passing day, and Melissa realized that the farm was not just a physical home. It was a symbol of rebirth, of new beginnings, closing circles with the past. Although she was happy, Melissa felt there was one last piece that needed to be resolved. her relationship with Marcela. During a few visits to the psychiatric hospital, she realized that Marcela was no longer the proud, ambitious woman she once was. Her biological mother, now lost in her own world, lived in silence or spoke to the doll she carried as if it were her own daughter. On one of these visits, Melissa sat next to Marcela, holding her cold, fragile hand. Even without acknowledgement or answers, she said, "I forgive you, Mom, not for what you did to me, but because I don't want to carry that weight in my heart. I hope that one day you will find peace." Somehow, Melissa felt that this gesture was not just for Marcela, it was also for herself. It was the closing of a painful cycle, and now she could move on without resentment. The future shines brighter. Back at the farm, Melissa was welcomed with open arms. Thiago, Anna, and her siblings organized a small celebration, planting a new tree near the oak tree where Thiago had spoken to her months earlier. The tree was a symbol of growth and the continuity of life. As Melissa looked at the newly planted tree, she felt a deep gratitude. She had a father who loved her, an adoptive mother who treated her like a daughter, and brothers who respected her. She didn't just find a family, she found herself. From that day on, Melissa knew that her past didn't define who she was. The love, forgiveness, and bonds she had built were what truly mattered. She had a home, a future, and most of all, a heart full of hope. Thus ends Melissa's journey, a story of betrayal, redemption, and the discovery of the true meaning of family.